Loki. Oh, Loki. Yeah, Loki. Yeah, right.
All
right, guys.
Thank you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming to the panel. Anthony Michael Hall needs no introduction. I think it's amazing you're here. In particular, my wife got me into the Dead Zone.
Oh, cool.
And that went on forever.
Yeah, it was a good run, man. We did back in 2001 to 2006, so 5 years. We did 80 episodes of it, and it was really a great experience. And the best part is that's where I met my wife in Vancouver. She had left Europe and moved from Slovakia, and she was there going to school and modeling and working, and that was the best part of it. But I love Vancouver. We both do. It's a beautiful, beautiful city. If you guys haven't seen it. Yeah, so it was a great experience, and I never thought I'd have a TV show. So I was really just felt very blessed and excited, and we had a great run. We did the first 4 seasons in Vancouver, and then the last year we went to Montreal, which was also a great city.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was cool.
So do you live in Canada or in the U.S.?
No, we live in the U.S. Yeah,
Okay.
but that's just where we met. And then, I loved Vancouver so much that when I did the show, I just stayed there. Never really came home on the weekends. It was such a beautiful city, and the people were so cool. So I really loved it. Real highlight of my life. And then we went back there. It was a couple of years ago. I was doing Riverdale, and it was cool too. As I ran into some of the crew that I'd worked with, and it was a really great experience. And, I owe that show to Mr. Michael Pillar. He was a gentleman that created it. He's a very interesting guy. He gave me the role. He saw me play Bill Gates in Pirates of Silicon Valley. And believe it or not, this is kind of a story about agents in Hollywood, but it was offered to my agency at the time. The real name was today, but they kind of passed on it, And it was only because he kept making any efforts, and he made a second or third effort. And then I found out about the offer. So it was a great experience, and it ran for 5 years. And Michael Pillar was interesting because he started out working in standards and practices at the networks, and then he just naturally kind of self-taught and became a writer. And then he started really applying himself. So then we partnered with Gene Roddenberry. They went on to create Deep Space Nine and Voyager and all these other cool shows. And he was a great man. Unfortunately, he passed from cancer. But his son was one of the producers of the show, and he's still a good friend. So again, Dead Zone was a great experience. We did 80 episodes over 5 years. It was a lot of fun.
Nice. I was shocked when I heard you were in Halloween Kills because
Me too. I was shocked too. I was like, I got the job. Universal called me.
Is this something you actively sought? Did they come after you?
I did, yeah. The truth is, in my career, guys, honestly, I've had offers over the years, but I've honestly had to earn all the work I've done. And it made me a better worker, a harder worker. It made me appreciate things. And the case is true with this. But when it came up back in 2019, through my management company, which is a company called Untitled, they're great guys. And what I did is I requested a meeting with David Gordon Green. And he was kind enough to comply, and we met in Los Angeles at the hotel he was staying at. And at that point, he told me a little bit about what he and Danny McBride had done. They had recently moved back to South Carolina, Charlotte, where they're from. And they're great guys. They have a company called Rough House, and they did a lot of shows, you guys know, like, films like Pineapple Express. And Danny's a great comedian. They did Vice Principal, Eastbound and Down. These guys are like brilliant with comedy. So I was a fan of theirs. I'd auditioned for their stuff before, didn't get it. So I was super stoked to meet David. And the guy couldn't have been cooler. We met at his hotel. He was on a first-name basis with the bartender in the lobby, just super chill. He was wearing like a Bob Seger concert t-shirt. I'm like, this guy's cool. And as I got, we had a talk for about an hour. We talked about his process and how he liked to work. And I just asked him about his objectives and what he wanted to achieve with this film, and we just hit it off right away. And then I screen tested about a week later at Blumhouse. And then I guess, I brought it, I guess. I did my best. I really remember going full throttle. Like, that's something I feel like, it's interesting what I do for a living. It's like, acting, I think, is like a misnomer. I think it's really about being real, being as honest as you can. And that's what I've learned in my career, doing comedy as a kid with John Hughes, and then, over these 4 decades, this is my 45th year in the business. I started when I was 8 years old, 53. You just try to really, but one of the tricks I do is I make the crew the first audience, and I just really try to deliver the best I can. With this role, I felt that Tommy should be a hero, he's kind of leading the town against Myers. But in fairness to my fellow actors and all those great people I got to work with, it's the same arc we all have, because everybody at the beginning of the film, if you guys have seen it, they go from, sort of commiserating and meeting as survivors and victims, and then they make a decision to unify and fight and really come together. So I think that's really what gives it, what propels the movie in that first act and how it takes off. And so I was just super excited, and David and I got along so well. And it was about a week into the film where he said, I think you need a weapon. I go, cool. He goes, I'm gonna give you a bat. It's gonna be called the Huckleberry. I went, dude, I'm in, let's go. Where's the bat? Let's go. But it's really cool how he works, guys. Like the black gentleman who's in the film, his name is Brian, his last name. You know, the bar owner at the beginning of the movie? That guy's a friend of David Gordon Green's. He owns a restaurant in Austin, Texas, barbecue place. Has 16 children, by the way, and a shotgun collection. Told me for his daughters. And it's just really cool how David works. So he hires actors, he hires non-actors, and it was just a great experience, Halloween Kills. So that's how it happened. We shot only about 6 weeks back in 2019, and then they delayed the picture for obvious reasons, COVID and how our world changed. And then it got released last week, and it's made over like 50 million. So that's awesome. I'm really excited. Hopefully I'll get some more movies going.
It would be great to see you on screen.
Thank you.
Because you've had such a varied career. Starting, like you said, you started when you were 8. Now, was this something you wanted to do, or were your parents involved? How does an 8-year-old become?
Yeah, no, it's funny how it happened. Well, I was one of those hammy kids. Like, who remembers doing shows for your family when you were a kid, right? Like, right, doing shows. Everybody did shows for them. So I started out like doing funerals, wakes, weddings. And I would get up there and I'd imitate my uncles and aunts, and honest to God, that's how it happened. There's that old Eddie Murphy movie, Raw. Do you guys remember that one?
Yeah.
The 80s concert movie. And he's got that great sequence at the beginning where they reenact his childhood. There's like a little kid and he's doing shows for his family. That's exactly how I started. And then when the first job I did in 1976, I worked with the late great Steve Allen. And Steve Allen was the gentleman who created The Tonight Show. He wrote, scores of songs. He was a published author. I mean, he was really a Renaissance man. He was a great guy. And it was through a friend of my mother's, where I grew up in New York City, that heard about the audition. And I remember as a little boy, I went with my mother to the Waldorf Astoria to meet Steve Allen. I'll never forget when I was in the waiting room, man, those big high ceilings. It's an old famous hotel in Midtown Manhattan. And the door opens, and I remember looking up and seeing Steve Allen. He was a very tall man. He was about 6'4". So as a kid, my first impression was he was as tall as the ceilings were high. When I looked up, it was like Steve Allen. But he was a great guy, so that's how I started. I did this play. The play was called The Wake, and it was based on his life during the Depression when he was a little kid. And so it was a kind of Eugene O'Neill type family drama. So that was my first experience. And then I started doing commercials. It was kind of like a hobby. I really kind of went after school. But what's strange, when I think back on my life, I really had a work ethic as a kid. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. It was just a hobby, but I would literally go from school and hop on a bus or a train. At a little bit older, like about 10 or 11 now, I started to audition and go for that kind of stuff. And then I got a movie in 1980 called Six Pack with Kenny Rogers. Do anybody remember that one? That's an old school one. My man. And, and that was a fun film. Diane Lane was in it. She was 16 years old at the time. It was like a fun family adventure kind of film. And that was for 20th Century Fox. And then my life changed when I met Matty Simmons and Harold Ramis. So it was Matty Simmons. Matty Simmons was a great gentleman. He passed on about a year ago in his 90s. He had a great long life. And he created Diners Club. He created National Lampoon's Magazine. He was an entrepreneur. And from National Lampoon's Magazine, hi guys. Hi. Plenty of seats, come on in.
Oh yeah.
And so Matty Simmons then went from National Lampoon Magazine to creating a brand, and he started making films, and he did classics like Animal House and some other films you see after that. He didn't do Caddyshack or Stripes or those, but he produced Animal House. That was a big success. And so Vacation, it started out, it was a short story in National Lampoon Magazine. Now this goes into the John Hughes territory. John Hughes, did anybody ever see She's Having a Baby with Kevin Bacon, Elizabeth McGovern?
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the John Hughes films from the 80s. What's interesting about it is that's his autobiography, essentially,
Oh, wow.
Meaning he worked in Chicago writing copy for advertising. And if some of you, most of you are too young to remember, but in the 80s there was this commercial where the guy would test his beard with the credit card. Remember that one?
Yeah.
That was John Hughes.
I remember that.
Remember that one, the Joker?
I do.
Dude.
I do.
Yeah, so that was John. So he was writing copy, and that's why I mentioned that film, because in the film, Kevin Bacon is an ad guy, and he falls in love with his wife, who Elizabeth McGovern was playing, Nancy Hughes, essentially. And and they were just great people. So that's how it all started. Vacation, I got to work with Maddie and Harold Ramis. And Harold Ramis was a great one. You know, everybody remembers him from Ghostbusters, but he's responsible for, I would say, a half dozen of the 10 or 15 biggest comedies of all time. So Harold directed Caddyshack, he directed Stripes. He was a go-to comedy writer. He co-wrote all those movies, and he was brilliant. So Harold and Maddie and John, I consider my great mentors, because as a kid they saw something in me. Something that, the goofy kid that was doing weddings and funerals, just mimicking family members, but they saw something in me as a kid, and I thank God for that, because they put me to work. And now there's an interesting connection, because John Hughes, it was from that vacation story that he sold to Lampoon magazine that he was commissioned to then write the script. But I didn't meet John on vacation. I met him right after that. So then I did 16 Candles, Breakfast Club, and Weird Science with John. So but those first 4 big movies were John Hughes scripts, and that changed my life and gave me a career. Long answers, guys, sorry.
Wow. Well, we could talk forever, but
Yeah, if
we
there's
need to
any
open it up to these guys. Anybody have any questions?
Please, yeah. Yes, ma'am.
So I was wondering, have you guys maybe talked about doing like a reunion for like Breakfast Club or 16 Candles?
Yes,
Class
we
reunion.
did. This is what happened. So basically, sadly, the last time I got to speak to John Hughes, it was in 1988, I believe, and he called me with John Candy on the phone. Can you imagine? Now, here's
Wow.
what happened. When they did Trains, Planes, and Automobiles, they had done a film before that, I believe, called The Great Outdoors. Now, that film sprang from their friendship. They really became great friends. The Hughes family and the Candy family would go on vacations together. So when you see The Great Outdoors, Dan Aykroyd is essentially playing John, right? And then Candy was himself. So they did The Great Outdoors, they did Planes, Trains, which is such a great movie. And so they called me together, which was really cool. And to your question, John brought it up at that point. He was playing with the idea of doing a sequel to The Breakfast Club. And he thought it was interesting, and the 3 of us were talking, just kind of hanging out, on the phone. And we were on the phone for like 2 hours, the 3 of us. And so it was in his thinking, it was on his radar. He was playing with the idea at that point. Now, the other thing I want to add to that is last year I was contacted by a writer-director named Nikki Solotsi, and he wrote a script called The Class. The Class wound up being made this past summer. It's not a remake of The Breakfast Club, but I wound up co-producing it, and it's sort of an updated version of The Breakfast Club from Nikki's perspective. It's an original screenplay. So I have the Paul Gleason role in this one. Now I'm the assistant principal. Times change. So we have a really good cast. We have young actors. They're very talented. Lyric Ross, who's on This Is Us, African-American actress. She's excellent. A young lady named Hannah Keppel, who's on Cobra Kai, is in it. A guy named Charlie Gillespie, who has a hit show on Netflix. So now this version, again, it's not a remake, but it's an original, but inspired by it. So they're all in detention. 6 kids instead of 5. I am the assistant principal, and we have Debbie Gibson in the film, who's a great actress. She was really cool. So she plays their drama teacher, and she gives the kids a task at the beginning of the film, which is they have to come in and kind of do an improv, present a character. And so that's what kind of sets it off in this new modern day, kind of inspired by Breakfast Club version of The Class. So we shot at Elmhurst University, the suburbs of Chicago this summer. And it was just great for all these reasons, to go back to Chicago with my wife to meet all these young actors and to work with them. And then we did this film, which will hopefully be out next year. And we already have interest from Hulu and Netflix and some other companies that are interested in buying it. So it was a great experience. I never thought in my lifetime I would not remake a film or even do anything similar to like what I've done with John, but Nick wrote such a good script, and I was so impressed by this young cast. They were awesome. So hopefully you guys will see that next year once we have distribution for it. So, yeah. Any other questions?
I have one.
Yes, sir.
I'm an older gentleman, 42, and I would like to get into acting. Where do you recommend I start?
Cool. Thank you, sir. All right. These 2 guys, what are your names, guys? Anthony?
Joseph.
And Joseph, we just met in the lobby a few minutes ago. They asked me the same question, and I will share the same thing I share with you. First of all, I'd read as much as you can. I mean, there's great stuff. In terms of actually practical work, I'll tell you what I told the guys, which is if you can do projects, if you can work at a university level on some indies, or student projects rather, and if you can do background work, so I would really suggest that, because it's like, you make good money. People make $150, $200 a day to work on background artists, they call them. And you can also, this is what I told these 2 young gentlemen, you can really glean a lot. You can learn by watching. You're meeting people, you're networking, and you're also making a movie, and you're part of it. So I'd recommend that to you. That would be a great way to start. I would also recommend like an improv group is fun, because it's a way to loosely approach acting,
Okay.
you know what I mean, as opposed to, but also there's great acting classes. You know, my wife studied with some great teachers in LA. I've taken a lot of private coaching over the years. I started out, I went to Lee Strasberg Institute, and I took a kids acting course. This is like in the early 80s. So acting classes, improv classes, reading, and then if you can do background work, I would recommend that.
Okay.
You know, because you can make money while you're learning.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah, man, my pleasure. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
You mentioned how Ramus Foods obviously solidified his life and legacy in the hearts of all of us in the company and the community itself. How does it shape the way you work or act when working for or with someone of that magnitude?
Great question, man. Wow. When's the book dropping? That sounds like Leonard Maltin. It's good. Young guys today, man. Excellent question. Well, you know what's interesting? And I'm going to connect this to David Gordon Green. I felt, now at this age I am here, I'm a middle-aged guy, but I felt there was a common thread between Harold, John Hughes, they were very similar, and even David Gordon Green. The enjoyment factor. They worked with a sense of joy. These guys were happy to be doing what they did. They loved it. They were always laughing. They were always open to suggestions and collaborating. They all had this in common, two great writers that became beloved, great comedy directors. But the other thing they have, John particularly, just the humility to be open to collaboration, to let things happen, you know. So they really taught me that, to have fun, to be nice, you know, and just that open spirit. Like when I worked on Halloween Kills, you'd be amazed, guys, if you could watch David Gordon Green direct. Like everybody, he was cool with everybody. Sometimes directors hide in the village, they don't want to be, you know. I've heard stories about Scorsese, he's in his own room, he doesn't want anybody looking at the monitor. Everybody has their own process, you know. But these guys, they were all very chill, very open, very cool, and David Gordon Green would take ideas from anybody. So those are some of the things, you know, that I would say about those great guys that I worked with. Thank you for the question. Yes, sir, young man.
How did you start acting?
How did I start? Well, when I was 8 years old, I auditioned for that play I was talking about, and that was an interesting experience. I didn't have any experience at that point, and so I auditioned for it, and it was at a theater in New York City called the Symphony Space on the Upper West Side, and yeah, I just kind of went in and read the part. It was actually after I met the producer of it, Steve Allen, at his hotel, and then I had a second audition at that theater, and then I did that play, and I was a kid. How old are you, buddy?
I'm 14.
Awesome, man. Excellent. What are you looking to do in your life? What inspires you?
A lot of things.
Cool. Like what? You like sports? You like movies? Yeah?
Sport.
Cool, man. Excellent. Good for you.
And I want to act too.
Okay, cool. You can do it. You can do it. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
What was Kenny Rogers like to work with?
Oh, one of the nicest guys. He really was a great guy. So in 1980, we met in Athens, Georgia. We made that film. That's where his house was. He had a beautiful home in Athens. We shot it in Atlanta, in the Georgia area, and he couldn't have been nicer. As you guys know, that he was a major country star at that time, but he couldn't have been a nicer guy. I've really learned that over the years. Sometimes the most successful people, honestly, they can be really great, down to earth, and he really was. He had a wrap party for us, and when we finished that movie. So that movie is about a bunch of orphans that he kind of adopts, or we adopt him, and he's a race car driver, and he kind of takes us on the road as his pit crew. It's kind of like a nice family-friendly movie, but he was a great guy. And when we did that film, when we wrapped, he threw the wrap party at his ranch, and he was a man who happened to be blessed with great wealth. He had horses, and he had dune buggy, he had all kinds of fun stuff, helicopters. I mean, it was all nice stuff, but it was really cool. So he took us up in helicopter rides, and we had the wrap party at his house. We got to ride horses, and that says a lot about him. And then years later, about 15 years ago, I had the privilege of seeing him again. I went down to see his concert somewhere in Orange County, where I live in Los Angeles. And he was so nice. And I saw his show, and then he actually introduced me in the audience, which I didn't expect. And he was a really nice man, very humble and kind. Yes, sir.
Did your parents want you to act?
Good question. Yeah, I mean, my mother was a singer, and so she was a jazz singer. So it was kind of like when that play came up, it was just like a novelty. It was just like, I'll try that, And I think just because I was a loose, kind of, fun kid, I kind of went for it, you know? So that's why I would encourage you to go for your dreams. Whatever it is you want to do, you can do it. You should have that determination and the resolve, you know? And also try different things. It's cool that you have a lot of interest. I think that's a good way to be too. So like when I was a kid, I studied karate. I studied art. I would go to the Art Students League in New York, and I would study anatomy, drawing, and I took dance classes. I took Taekwondo. I did a lot of stuff. And so, but like yourself, if you have a lot of interest, explore all those interests, you know, because it'll lead you to new things, and you'll always be learning. You know, so I would recommend you continue to do what you're doing. Play sports and mix it up. Yeah.
So that brings up an interesting question. Obviously, you're a lifelong learner, having done a ton of things, which is awesome. Have you ever done any like film degree or formal acting things, or has it always been what's needed at the time?
Great question. Yeah, no, I only have a high school education. I figured that in my life, because my mother was one of these tough Irish, Italian, Catholic moms, and she was like, you gotta go to college, you know? And I certainly respect that, and I would encourage everybody to get a great education. For me, I just wanted to work my craft, and it's interesting too, because my mother would always, she was one of these moms, like she would like, read the classics and tell me to read, and that was never really into reading. But to be very honest, after high school, that's when I really got into it. So I began a process of just learning, you know, just wandering around Barnes and Nobles and bookstores, and I think that that's really important. I think to always be self-educating and learning, and it just is great in so many ways, as we all know. So I really enjoy that, you know. I remember asking my father's business partner. My stepfather was my manager for years, and it was around this time when I was in high school and I still really wasn't into it. And I would ask him, like, why are you always reading? He goes, because I'm always looking for the truth. You know what I mean? I thought that was it wasn't trying to sound profound or anything, but it's true, you know. And it's interesting when you read, when something really hits and resonates with you, it kind of jumps off the page in a way. And you also can be very compelled to learn other things, and it can lead you in other directions. So, yeah, I love reading. I really do, and I've always enjoyed it. So, yeah, I just kind of self-educated myself up to this point. Thanks for joining us, folks. Yeah. I gotta ask, buddy, what is the outfit? Is that it?
Pennywise.
Pennywise, yeah, that's great. My wife cracks up because after we saw that film, I won't do the film face today, but she's like, do the Pennywise face. I can do that Pennywise face. It's a little scary with my Irish nose. Nobody wants to see it. That movie was so good, right? I only had one problem with the sequel. They should have brought the adults in. I thought the first one was awesome with all the kids. Anybody else feel that? Anyway, talking Pennywise.
Yeah.
Those movies were good. Yeah.
You could do like a Pennywise Halloween crossover.
Dude, it can happen.
Yeah.
Girl's not coming back. Yes, sir. Once again, my man.
What was your first movie or show that you ever did?
First movie, okay. I did a movie of the week, they used to call it, when I was in 1979. It was called Jennifer's Journey, something you probably couldn't find. No, actually, excuse me, there is one before that I did. I did a movie when it was actually right after that. It was called The Gold Bug. You can find it on YouTube. And you are how old, buddy? How old are you?
14.
14. So I did this movie when I was about 12. And it was based on, there's a famous author named Edgar Allan Poe, and he wrote a short story called The Gold Bug. And it takes place in the late 1800s, and it's about a kid who